after interviewing thousands of poor farmers in countries like Nepal, Bangladesh, China, Mexico, and Zambia, I've learned that practical solutions to extreme poverty can only come from listening to poor people themselves, not from the army of poverty experts in the world. I've developed 12 steps for practical problem solving that have helped 17 million people move out of poverty and into the middle class forever. These 12 steps apply equally well to finding practical solutions to the big social problems you may be working on. I've described these 12 steps in my book, Out of Poverty. For the last 5 years I've been working on a book, and I finally finished it. It took me 5 years to write a measly 200 pages. The book is called Out of Poverty: What Works When Traditional Approaches Fail. I really wrote the book to create a revolution in how we think about poverty and what we do about it. It won't create the revolution by itself, but I hope it helps. For the past 25 years, 2 questions have plagued my curiosity. What makes poor people poor? And what can they do about it? Because of these 2 infernal questions, I've had long conversations with thousands of one-acre farmers in developing countries. What I learned made it possible for IDE, the development organization I started 25 years ago, to help 17 million a day people move out of poverty forever. The first 3 steps to practical problem solving are probably the most obvious, the most simple, and the least frequently followed. The first is, go to where the action is. You can't sit in your office at the World Bank and figure out how to solve the problem of poverty in Myanmar. Step 2, talk to the people who have the problem and listen to what they have to say. In the 1990s, agriculture experts in Bangladesh were dismayed at the tiny amounts of fertilizer small farmers in Bangladesh were applying to their monsoon rice crops. They set up intensive farmer education programs, but nothing worked. Finally, somebody asked a couple of farmers why they used so little fertilizer. That's easy, they said. Every 10 years or so, we have a major flood that wipes out everything we plant. So we only use as much fertilizer as we can afford to lose in a 10-year flood. All of a sudden, these farmers were transformed from ignorant, superstitious peasants to people who could teach the agricultural experts a thing or two. Step 3, learn everything there is to know about the problem's specific context. The specific context of 800 million of the 1.2 billion people in the world who live on less than $2 a day is a tiny farm with poor soils and no irrigation. These farms are typically 1 acre and split into 4 or 5 separate scattered plots. So here's the 4th point. If you come up with a solution to a problem, there's no reason to be modest. Some of the biggest problems in the world really require big solutions, which are really small solutions applied thousands and thousands of times. Step 5, think like a child. It's a little bit ironic that thinking big and thinking like a child go together, but they do. You have to think like a child to find the obvious solution to a big problem that people have missed. Number 6, see and do the obvious. If we can't see our blind spots, how can we see and do the obvious? Immersing yourself in the problem helps. Step 7. If somebody already invented it, you don't have to. It's easy these days to look for solutions that other people may have already come up with.
And it's variety 144.
Step 8. Make sure your approach has positive, measurable impact that can be brought to scale. Step 9. Design to specific price targets. Affordability rules the design process for poor customers. Number 10, follow practical 3-year plans. No matter how powerful and world-changing your vision for the future is, unless you can translate it into an effective work plan for the first 3 years, you'll never get there. Step 11. Continue to learn from your customers. When I started ID 25 years ago, I decided I would interview at least 100 customers a year, and I've done that. At this point, I've interviewed more than 3,000 poor farm families and walked around with them through their farms. When they told me that they invested their new income from a treadle pump in the education of their kids, we designed a $12 solar lantern so their kids could read at night. When they said they invested some of their money from a drip system in a milk buffalo or in some goats, we learned everything there was to learn about small livestock and started helping farmers with small livestock operations. Number 12, don't be distracted by what other people say. Just about everything that I have worked on that has turned out to be a smashing success, I've heard many people tell me that I was wasting my time. 1.5 million treadle pumps later, we had 750,000 acres newly under irrigation. If I had listened to the people that told me that it was a waste of time, we never would have gotten there. If you're willing to go out on a limb, visit the people who have the problem in their real-life setting and listen to what they have to say. And most importantly, have a keen interest in learning new things. Then this approach is for you. If you and your group decide the best thing you can do is donate money, make sure you pick organizations that have measurable impacts, like poverty organizations that increase the income of people who live on less than $1 a day.
I've lived here about 6 months now. Well, it's basically a little foam rubber and a piece of carpet.
Because actually allá nuestra gente sigue aferrada a la tradición de los